All right, this evening I'm going to touch on a couple of subjects that are currently front and center in the news right now, and the one is immigration, DACA, and immigration, and the other one's going to be um, welfare reform and stuff. But this video is going to be about immigration. Uh, Real briefly on DACA, my personal opinion on this is those that are 21 and younger, the dreamers, or whatever you want to call them. They're here illegally. They were brought here as children by their parents, not of their own course, and they've grown up in the United States. My personal opinion in that is, and I empathize with them. It wasn't their fault. They didn't have any say so in the matter. If they're 21 and younger, I think we ought to give them a break. I empathize with some of those kids. I mean, if your parents, if you were 10, 12 years old, and your parents immigrated to another country and brought you with them, what are you going to do? Okay? When you turn 18, you're going to jump ship and run back to the country that you were born in? No, you've established your life here. You've established yourself here. I think we need to do something for those kids. Like I said, those 21 younger. Because we don't consider you in this country the age of majority. In other words, legally allowed to do things on your own until you turn 18. And so, until they turn 18, they can't do anything about their status or their situation. So I think we need to go ahead and give them green card, residency card, whatever it is, so that they are no longer deportable under the terms. And the reason why I extend it up to the age of 21 is because that gives you 3 years after you've turned 18 to have done something about your immigration status. Now, for those that are over 21, Bubba, you're SOL. You didn't care enough. You know that you're not here legally. And you're over 21 years old. Even though you were brought here as a child, and you still, and a lot of these dreamers are well up in their mid to late 20s, some of them's even in their 30s. And you've been of legal age to do something about your immigration status for that long, 5, 10 years, and you still haven't done anything, to me, that tells me straight and simple, you could care less about the laws of my country. And therefore, I have no empathy for you anymore. But if you're 18 and younger, or you're 18 to 21, from 18 to 21, you're still trying to figure out what you're supposed to do. I'd say let's go ahead and work with those under 21 and help them out. Get them a residency card, a green card, or whatever the situation is they need. I don't know. There's so many different things in the State Department that can give you the legal status that you need around here. So we need to get them that information. Get them that status. But like I said, anybody over the age of 21, you've been here long enough to know that you're not here legally, you're SOL. Okay? I'm just going to say that. Leave it there. Okay? Because right now all that stuff's being debated in Congress. Not really. Democrats ain't debating squat. So, but we're going to move on to border security. I call it a barrier instead of a wall. President Trump's talked about building a wall. I call it we need to build a barrier. Okay? Because if you look across the border from the Gulf to the Pacific, the differencing in the terrain is not amicable to a wall through the entire area. There are some areas that a fence would be better suited for security. My best recommendation as to the type of barrier that needs to be put up is to get with the Border Patrol agents that work the different sectors along the border. They're the ones that's been there 10, 15, 20 years. They're the subject matter experts. Those are the ones that I personally would consult to say what, in your professional opinion, would be the best thing to put up in order to stop the illegal immigration. Now, this is a twofold operation. Securing the border does not just involve illegal immigration. It also involves drug trafficking. Okay? And we got to look at the barrier that we put up has to have both subjects in its end game. All right? Once we determine what's best where, okay, I believe I have a better way of building it for less money, and I think it's going to give us better quality. You see, this is the one problem with everything in the government. And what that is everything goes to the lowest bidder. Alright? That does not always equate to the best quality. What I believe, and this is a better way, and I've thought of something like this since back in the 80s when I was in the Marine Corps. Back in the mid-80s, late 80s, the Capitol Dome on the Capitol building had been many, many years since it had been shined up, so to speak. It needed some rehabilitation. And the government spent literally tens of millions of dollars on civilian contractors to come in there and clean it, make repairs, all the kind of stuff that needed to be done to make it look pretty and new again. In listening to the money that we were spending, I was in the Marine Corps at the time, and listening to the money that we were spending to do this, I kind of scratched my head and was like, why? Look at the military, folks. You have, in the Army and the Navy and the Marine Corps, you have combat engineers. Their jobs is construction and building, okay? In the Navy, you have the Seabees. Same job, just different name. Why couldn't have we implemented them in the 80s? There are job skills, job specialties in those all three branches of services that deal with that same type of situation. Why couldn't have we have used them? It would have cost us a fraction to have cleaned up the Capitol building. So my proposal for building the wall is using those folks. Now, I'm not talking about the active duties. I'm talking about the Reserves and National Guard. Okay? The Reserves and National Guard do a 1 week a month training period and a 2 week active duty training period every year. During their 2 weeks, see, and their whole pay for all of that time is already figured in the Pentagon's budget for the year. Okay? So we're already paying these folks. That money's already spent. So if we take the Guard and the Reserves of the Army and Marine Corps combat engineers and the Navy Seabees, and we put them down on the wall along the border for their 2 week training period, have everybody who is a unit east of the Mississippi starts in Texas on the Gulf Coast, everybody who is west of the Mississippi start in California on the Pacific Coast, minus Texas. We won't send the Texas National Guard to California to work on the wall. We'll let them work on it in their own state. Okay? But anyway, if we utilize that, we're going to get a better product, because these folks are going to build a quality product. It's a pride thing for them that they do something with pride. It's the military. The only additional cost to the government is going to be in the material that we use. We got to buy the material and a little bit of extra transportation. Say a unit from Maine is supposed to come down to Fort Bragg for their 2 week training. Well, instead of so that budget is already been money's been spent for their transportation from Maine to Fort Benning or Fort Bragg or either one. So now it's just the additional cost from where their original destination was to where they need to be at on the border. That's phenomenal compared to the money that we're talking currently about spending on this border wall, on the border barrier. Okay? We put them down there. Now, and living arrangements are going to be taken care of. What we will do is we'll sit down a section at a time. For example, they're going to build a base camp for them to live out of. All right? And on that, and we'll say they're going to build, the base camp will be positioned 100 yards or 100 miles from the coast. So they'll build a base camp for them to live out of. They'll start on the coast and they'll start working up to the base camp. They'll work 100 miles past the base camp. That's 200-mile stretch is what that base camp is responsible for. They'll go 100 miles past that, build another base camp. Pick up where they left off on the wall, go 100 miles past that base camp. Okay? That way they have a place to live while they're building. And that way there's no additional expense for lodging. Their equipment is already there. We can pre-position equipment so that all the unit has to do is come down, pick up the equipment left over, take over the equipment from the outgoing unit and just keep moving. Okay? Now we can implement some of the active duty units in there too. It's always good, and that's part of what the 2 weeks of active duty training is for the reserves to work with active duty units so that they can kind of gel together, and so if they have to go to combat together, that reserves and active duty is used to working together. So we can implement some active duty units in there as well to work alongside of them. You may have a couple weeks gap also in between units where active duty personnel could fill in. And what that does, it gives the active duty units something different to do too. I know at Camp Lejeune, the combat engineers, I mean, they do all of their training on Camp Lejeune. It kind of gets boring when you're using the same training areas to do the same stuff over and over and over again. And what this does, it gives them real world experience out in the real world doing something besides working in that same freaking little training area all the time. Alright? Now, what did I just do? I just talked about saving money. We're going to get the barrier built. I believe it'll get done quicker this way, too. And it'll get a lot better quality, I think. And it'll cost us a fraction of what the current plans are. Alright? Now, that's just a basic overview of how it's to be done. Now, the rest of the immigration stuff is, and this is the other thing about shutting it down. As the barrier is being built, alright, like I talked in the other video about restructuring the government, we're already in the process of building the wall, the barrier. We're in the process of restructuring the government, and therefore we're talking about the number of immigration personnel needed along the border to secure it. We cannot hire enough people in the immigration, INS, or ICE, Border Patrol, to completely secure things. Now, part of the border security isn't just a physical barrier, but implementing technology into it as well. Motion detectors, heat sensors, drones, whatever it is we need to do to secure the border. All of that works together. It's a combined operation to do it. Now, the barrier itself will be built in a manner to... Oh, crap. The word I was wanting to use just escaped me. Anyway, it will be a benefit to the electronics part of the surveillance. And as the barrier is being built, as the engineers and stuff are moving along the border, those base camps won't be getting torn down. They're going to get utilized. Because part of border security is going to be the military. National Guards and Reserves. And what that is the MPs. And of course, this case where the Air Force helps come in play too. The Air Force has MPs as well. They call them Air Patrol. And so, at least they used to. All right. I've been out of the Marine Corps for for about 20 years now. I'm sure there's probably a few terminologies changed in that time period. So, forgive me if I'm not up to date on the current terminology or titles of some MOSs. But anyway, what we start using those base camps for is the personnel patrolling the border. We bring in, again, during their 2 weeks active time every year, Reserve National Guard MP units from the Army, Navy, Air Force, and the Marines to patrol that 200-mile sector of the border. Okay? That gives them real-world training. It saves us money because their paychecks are already figured in the federal budget for the year. It's just the little additional cost of the increased travel time to and from the border. And it gives them better training for their jobs. Now, we can also, in that aspect, implement a few active duty units here and there so they can get some real world training. But we also can implement some infantry. See, in the infantry, we do foot patrols. We constantly are learning procedures for foot patrols, vehicle patrols, and such like that. Putting the infantry in there, the reserves, some active duty. All of this is going to give each of the military units some real world training. It'll be a benefit to our military, but it'll also be a tremendous asset to the Border Patrol agents. It saves the government a lot of money where we don't have to spend all this extra money to try to get enough people to handle the job. But it also gives the Border Patrol a tremendous boost in capabilities. Now, this also will help. Oh my gosh, it should cut drug trade into almost nothing. Because with all of those assets, now the physical barrier, with the electronic, the air assets, the foot patrols, dude, you're not going to be able to sneak across my border. It's going to be practically impossible. And if you're in the drug trade, you're really going to have trouble. Because that's what we're looking for. We're going to be patrolling for the drug trade. Now, this is something that I think we need to discuss. And that's Mexico. All right. President Trump campaigned on Mexico paying for the wall. And everybody's heads exploded. Now, let me give you some little interesting tidbits of information. I can tell you right now, I know for a fact, President Trump did not intend that Mexico would literally write us a check to help pay for the border. And that's not what he was saying. Although that's how the mainstream media and all the liberals took it. Okay? And the former president of Mexico. But what has he got to say so? He's a former president. Okay? Like our current former president hasn't figured out he don't have any say so either. Anyway. But what I listened to when I listened to President Trump, what I understood him meaning was there were taxes and tariffs that Mexico has received discounts and all this other stuff on, that he was going to do away with some of that stuff and take the extra money that we're not getting right now and use that to offset the cost of the wall. And in a roundabout way, Mexico's paying for it. This is what I think we need to do. I think we need to enter into negotiations with Mexico for the border security. You see, Mexico's biggest problem right now is the cartels and the drug trade. Now, the cartels primarily is drugs, but it's also the human trafficking. And that is the human trafficking of bringing people from, not Mexico. As a matter of fact, I recently seen something on the news where the majority of those crossing the border illegally are not Mexicans, but they're from other countries in Central South America and even from other countries around the world. And the cartel has a very, very good moneymaker in helping these people get through Mexico and cross the border into the United States illegally. Having Mexico work with us to secure the border would be a tremendous asset to them. Now, President Trump can tell you this. He wrote the book, Art of the Deal. Now, I'll be honest with you, I've never read it. I've intended to for years. I just never have. But it's pretty simple. If you're negotiating, and I learned this through the work that I did with Econo. When you're working with someone and negotiating with them over something, to get them on your side, it's got to be a win-win situation. They're not going to want to negotiate with you when you're getting all the goods and they're not getting anything good at all. That's how Obama did things. Remember the Iranian nuclear deal? The United States gave up everything and Iran got everything. What I'm talking about is sitting down with the government of Mexico and showing them where securing our border, stopping the illegal immigrants, as well as stopping the drug trade, would benefit them as much as benefiting the United States. That's how you get them on our side and have them help us. Okay? What help would they give? Well, that depends on what we can negotiate. I'm not going to make any suggestions on that. It would just depend on what we can work out between the two countries. We're neighbors. And neighbors helping neighbors is always a good thing. So right now, and this is why they would want to help. Because the cartels have, over the past several years, begun to hurt the tourist trade. Instead of just being in the interior of the country and the jungles and the little small poor towns and stuff, the cartels have become pretty brazen and have really started getting out into the tourist areas. Acapulco and other places like that have started to become a very dangerous place due to the drug trade and drug war. And it's hurting Mexico's economy with losing some of the tourist trade that they've always had. So by working with us to secure the border, that's going to put a big dent in the cartel's drug trade as well as the human trafficking trade. And maybe the United States working the deal out to where once the border is secure and we've shut that down, then maybe we can give them some assistance in the eradication of the cartels. And all of that is going to benefit Mexico and their tourist trade and benefit their economy. So when you offer a proposition like that, you got to work it out. You got to sit down and talk to them, negotiate with them, and see if there's not some way we can get them to help us. Those are my ideas. Those are things I'd like to try to work on. But that's how I think we can build the border, secure the border, build the barrier quicker, better, and way less expensive. Now, since we're going to have a surplus in the government, coming up with the money to spend to build the barrier, secure the border is not going to be a big deal. Okay? But I don't think we should spend as much as what is currently being anticipated. I believe we can do it a lot less expensive. It's all about saving money, folks. We're going to have extra money to spend. We don't need to be spending it. We need to be putting it on the national debt. So how can we bring the government budget down to $3 trillion a year? This is one way. By making sure that we're being very good stewards of the money that we have. Okay? So, let's work on that. Let's get the Senate. Put me in the Senate. So that's one of the things I can work on. Like I said, my first priority is going to be the budget. Until we get that done, we can't do anything else. But then that's what I believe we need to do for immigration. And DACA, like I said, the dreamers under 21, I can empathize with those folks. If you're over 21, you're screwed. You know, especially if you're in your late 20s, 30. You should have thought about that 10 years ago. 5, 10 years ago instead of waiting until now. But I understand the immigration policies in this country have been so lax that you didn't have to worry about it. One last thing about immigration, because we got all these 11, 12 million illegals in this country. And this is where I'm going to have a lot of hardcore Republicans not happy with me. Once we have the border secure, what do we do with these other illegals that's already in this country? We have an amnesty period. Okay? Now I just took all my conservative voters, they just went, okay. But we do an amnesty period. And what it has to be is you'll have to show proof that you've been in this United States for a minimum of whatever years we determine. Let's say, for the sake of argument for this video, we say 5 years. That you have not committed a crime. Parking ticket, speeding ticket. Yeah, okay. But you're not a criminal. You're not a convicted felon. And you are a productive member of society. You come in and you'll get a residency card, which gives you legal residence in the United States. Now, for citizenship, I believe it's 10 years, if I'm not mistaken. You have to be a legal resident of the United States for 10 years to apply for being a citizen. Well, that date starts the day you get your residency card. So in 10 years, if you wish to become a citizen of the United States, then you can apply at that point. Okay? But what this is going to do is this is going to eliminate all the illegals hiding in the shadows and being afraid of coming out and all this other stuff. The amnesty period is going to be for a certain time. Now, depending on the response and depending on the ability to process everybody, the amnesty period may be allowed to be extended at 3-month intervals, only based off on those two subjects. Once that is done, though, once the amnesty period is over, if you did not come in and get your residency card and you're caught in this country, I don't want to hear any whining or crying or boo-hooing or anything else. You're gone. You're out of here. Plain and simple. Okay? There's absolutely no reason. You had the opportunity. You see, this is the way I am about things. Everything is on your responsibility. The government's not responsible for you. For anything. And that's everybody in the country. You are responsible for your own actions. And if you're an illegal, and I give you an amnesty period, and you refuse to come in, when you get pulled over or you get caught in this country illegally after the amnesty period, you're going to be cuffed, hauled off to INS, and kicked back to whatever country you're originally from without any empathy at all. Because you basically told me, screw you, I don't care about your amnesty, I don't care about your country, I want to do it my way. Well, let me explain something, folks. This is the United States of America. We do it our way. And you either conform or you go home. I don't think there's any other reason for explanation there. All right? And that's just the way it is. So, those are my things on immigration. Think about it. I think you're going to like it if you really sit down and look at things. Hey, those looks like some pretty good ideas. It's about saving money, and it's about fixing the problems. That's the whole point, folks. Let's quit fiddle farting around with things. Let's just get stuff done. That's what President Trump wants to do. President Obama kept, well, we ain't going to get into that. I'll be nice. Okay, I'm sorry. I apologize to all y'all listening that I started to get into it. Never mind. I'll get on a soapbox and I'll be here for half the night. Anyhow, those are my policies. Those are the things that I'd like to see done about immigration. Again, I encourage comments, good and bad. Tell me what you think about it. If you like it, if you have some suggestions, if you don't like it, say, look, I don't agree with you. But let me explain something. And this is on every single video. I need to start saying it in every video. If you disagree with what I'm talking about, don't just come out and call me names or do other things like the liberals like to do now. All right, but tell me that you disagree. Okay, no, I don't agree with that policy. But don't just say you don't agree with it. Give me a better plan. Say, hey, I think we ought to do it this way. I think this is here and this is why. All right. If you just because you disagree with me, how many of these people in Congress tell the president that they refuse to do anything to help him out, but they ain't got a clue what to do themselves? They just don't want to help him do it because they don't want him to succeed. And I don't care if you don't like what I had to say. But I do care that you have an active voice in what's done. So tell me your ideas. You never know. You might have a better plan than I do. And I might like your plan, and when I go to Washington, that's the one I'll work with. So, talk to me. Give me your feedback. Most importantly, tell your friends about what I'm doing. I want to be your next senator. And this is what I'm going to do when I get there. Thank you all for watching.